Okay. We're talking today with Jerone Buffington of Ider, Alabama, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in Dade County, Georgia, Trenton, Georgia.
And what year?
1950.
All right.
April 24th.
Okay. Now, did you grow up there, or did you move around?
I lived in Ider, Alabama when I was born. It was a clinic just across the state line there, and so I grew up.
Okay, so you actually grew up in the town where you still live.
Right.
All right. And what was your family doing for a living when you were a kid?
Farming.
Okay. And what kinds of things were you growing?
You know, I don't know.
Okay.
I think, you know, corn and
Okay.
cotton.
Okay. So, but crops rather than a livestock farm primarily?
Oh, right, yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And did you finish high school?
Yes.
Okay. What year did you graduate?
1968.
Okay. And what did you do when you got out of high school?
I worked in Chattanooga, Tennessee at the munitions plant. They made TNT.
Okay. All right. Now, while you're doing that, kind of 68, 69, that period there, how much did you know about Vietnam at that time?
I didn't watch TV. I didn't watch the news, so I didn't have any knowledge of it.
Okay. But did you know people who had gone there or knew about them?
No, I didn't know anyone that had gone. A lot of the guys that were in my class in school were, they watched the news and they were concerned. A lot of bad press. And
Yeah.
so,
Okay. But you just went about your own business.
right.
All right. And so what changed that?
The lottery. They had a lottery, and my birthday was the second one they pulled out, and so I got a letter a few weeks later that said greetings, and so wow, it really says that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yes. And so so you know how you're drafted.
Right.
Okay. And when do you have to report for duty?
I was inducted January the 20th, 1970,
Okay.
and went that day to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and started basic training.
All right. Now, did you get a physical along the way?
Yes, we did physical the day of induction.
Okay. Now, how serious a physical was it?
Man, they checked us over.
Okay. And in some places, especially in the big cities, you had people who were trying to play games with the system or find a way to beat the system. Did you observe any of that where you were?
No, I didn't notice anyone. There were some guys that were saying they had this problem or that problem, and the doctor would take a special look to see about those things. But
Okay. All right. So now you go to Fort Knox, and what kind of reception do you get when you arrive at Fort Knox?
oh wow, drill sergeant came on the bus yelling and having fits, and so yeah, I thought, man, it's gonna be rough.
Mm-hmm. Had anybody warned you at all about what the military might be like?
No.
Okay. So this is really sort of all new. Okay.
Definitely new.
All right. And what kind of processing did you have to do when you got there?
Well, we went in. They were giving us shots with a gun on each shoulder, and I don't remember. Seems like we filled out some forms. Then we eventually went to a building and got blankets and bedding, and they took us to a place where we could pick out a bunk and get in for the night.
Okay. Had they cut your hair yet?
Not at that time.
Okay, so they're just getting you.
We arrived at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. All right. So, and then do you start training right away after that, or do they have to shave you and?
Yeah, the next day I think we got uniforms, and well, before we got them, we got a haircut, uniforms and boots and everything, and learning how to arrange all of this so that it looks like it's supposed to.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then what does the basic training consist of?
I goodness, it's been a long time. We, of course, we go through physical training. They start building you immediately for that, and then you're studying. We had classroom time. We're learning about military history and about the laws and the Geneva Convention. We learn about different weapons and how they function, and how to splice wires for a telephone.
Okay. And how much emphasis was there on discipline?
A lot. You have to have discipline, and you have to have an unquestionable discipline.
Okay. And what did they do when people screwed up?
Push-ups most of the time.
All right. Now, how easy or hard was it for you to adjust to all this?
I made it easy.
Okay.
There was no point in making it hard.
So you figured out you should just do what they tell you?
Just do what they tell you, and if someone else messes up, you're going to do push-ups too.
Yeah. But coming in from a farm, were you still in pretty good shape?
Fair.
I guess worked in a factory for a while, so who knows? But
yeah, I was in pretty good shape then. I could run or do whatever we needed to do, and so I wasn't overweight, and which would make it tougher on someone.
yeah. All right. Now, the people who were training you, had a lot of them been to Vietnam?
No, none of these guys had been.
Okay. Were a lot of them younger guys who were still learning how to be sergeants? Or?
Some of them were, and then we had a couple of guys that were older.
Okay. All right. Now, along the way, did you get any chance to, choose what your specialty would be, or were you just going to go where they told you?
No, they gave us tests, and they kind of decide the test put you in a spot.
Mm-hmm.
The test shows things you're interested in and the things you're knowledgeable about, and so it kind of puts you in a job that you're able to do.
Okay. And so what did they pick for you?
I was in the infantry.
Okay. All right. Now, how long did basic training last?
I think 8 weeks.
Yeah, that's the standard. Okay. And after basic training, where do you go next?
I went to Fort Polk, Louisiana for AIT
Mm-hmm.
and Tigerland.
Yep.
And
Now, what was that like?
that was intense. The drill sergeant I had there was young, had not been to Vietnam, and he was very serious about training us. And whenever we low crawling, you could low crawl 20 yards and turn around and come back 20 yards in 21 seconds, and you get 100 points on your PT test.
Mm-hmm.
But that was not good enough for this man.
Mm-hmm.
And 16 seconds was not good enough. And whatever we did, he always wanted more and better.
Okay.
And at the very last day or so, somehow we almost had an individual conversation, 3 or 4 guys there. And I said something about it not ever being good enough, and he said, if you get 100 points and you get shot because you're 1 second better than 100 points, you're still dead.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, puts a different light on it. And then later on, I really saw the lessons.
Okay. It's interesting that came from a guy who hadn't been anywhere yet.
Right.
Yeah. They probably had been trained by people at NCO school who had been there.
Yeah.
Were there other instructors around that clearly had been to Vietnam?
I don't think we had any in our company.
All right. And was that another 8 weeks?
Yes, 8 weeks.
Okay. And then what do they do with you after that's done?
I got a 30-day leave and then went to Vietnam.
All right. And I don't know, what was it like to go back home knowing you were going to Vietnam next?
Oh, it was good to see everyone and just relax for a few days. It had been really intense for about 16 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And,
All right. So how did they get you to Vietnam?
I flew to L.A. and at the Oakland station we were there for a time, and as they were grouping people up and putting them on flights and sending them to Vietnam, I eventually got on a flight. And
All right. What kind of place was it at Oakland? What was that like?
it was, I don't remember a lot about it, but it was a big building and a lot of people there.
Mm-hmm.
Had a lot of cots, and it was just a big open area mostly. And just really, we were just sitting around talking to each other until they called our name for the flight.
All right. So you fly then out of San Francisco area. Do you remember what route you took to get to Vietnam?
We landed in Hawaii and were there for a few hours. Then we went, and I'm not sure if we went there first, but we landed at Guam at some point in the Philippines, and we were, seemed like just hopping. But we finally got to Long Biên.
Okay. And what kind of plane were you on?
A 737.
Okay, so it's not a really big plane. It might have had to stop a few places.
Well, that was about the biggest we had then, I think, 737.
Well, 707, which is the older kind, was bigger.
Oh, it was?
Yeah, because 737 was sort of more of a middle-range jet. But yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, but it's the kind of one where it might have to stop. But it was a commercial type jet rather
Right.
than a military one.
Right.
Okay, so you land at Long Biên, which is outside of Saigon. All right. Do you remember, did you land during the day or at night?
It was daytime.
Okay. And what's your first impression of Vietnam when you get there?
Well, it was a good impression as it turned out. When I stepped up to the door, a whiff of the local landfill hit me, and I smelled that, and I said, my goodness, I'm not dying in this place. So it put the will to live right there.
All right.
And so the fight was on.
Okay. So at Long Biên, what do they do with you?
We were taken to an area, given barracks and bunks and actually hooches, and so we were waiting there to be assigned to a unit. I think, that was pretty much it. We just sat around talking and waiting on that assignment.
Okay. Now, did you hear anything about which were good or bad units to go to?
Guys were talking, but I never pay any attention to that. Just,
All right. Okay. So how long do you think you spent at Long Biên?
I was there a couple of days.
Okay. Did they give you any work to do, or just?
I think I pulled guard one night on the line on the perimeter. So,
All right. And when you were doing that, were you wondering what was out there?
just doing the job.
Okay. All right. So what unit do they assign you to, or?
Charlie Company, 2nd of the 506, 101st Airborne.
Okay. Now, did you get the assignment for that particular company right away, or did you just say go to the 101st Airborne?
They assigned me to Charlie Company.
Okay.
At that time.
All right. And how do they get you from Long Biên up to where the 101st is?
I think we rode a C-130.
Probably military transport. Okay. And now, when did you actually join the 101st?
Let's see. I got in country the 24th of June.
Okay.
And so it was about 2 days at Long Biên, and then I was in Phu Bai and Camp Evans.
Okay. Now, did you get any kind of training or orientation before you joined your company?
I don't remember anything right now.
'Cause some people did. There's a Screaming Eagles training thing where you do patrolling for a few days and stuff like that. But not everybody did that.
Yeah, I didn't do that.
Okay. And now the company itself was part of the brigade that was based at Camp Evans. So you go there. When you arrive at Camp Evans, what do they do with you?
We went to get our gear. We were putting rucksacks together, get a weapon assigned to us, get all of our canteens and equipment, and learn how to pack our rucksack, how to set up our pistol belt,
Okay.
carry a lot of gear on it.
Okay. And was the company in the field when you got there, or were they?
They were in the field, yes.
Okay. Now, did you go out to join them, or did you wait for them to come back?
We went out one day, and we may have just been on a riff or something, but and I think we actually were out there. A guy stepped on a booby trap and blew his foot off, and so we actually wound up spending more time out there than what was intended, I believe. And then we went back to the unit. We were there another day or so, and then Charlie Company was hit on Hill 902, and they needed replacements, and so we went out that after they were recovering there, and we went out and met up with them that day.
Okay. Now, but you had already been designated for Charlie Company before that?
Yes.
All right, so that was already the case. But you were not with them on 902 at that time. It sounds like they're still almost finishing processing you or whatever else might be, and things get messed up in the schedule. So you join them. Now, did they come back to camp basically after 902, and then you?
They came up on one of the fire bases, and I do not remember which one. It could have been Ripcord that they came up on, or
O'Reilly.
O'Reilly, possibly.
One of those. Okay. All right. So basically, you're really kind of joined. Now, had you met any of the people from the company before that?
No.
Okay. So your introduction to them is happening right after they've had this horrible night on Hill 902. Okay. So what's your first impression of the company when you joined them?
I had thoughts, so I wondered what they felt after they were hit hard the night before.
All right. And which platoon did you get assigned to?
First platoon.
Okay. And who was your platoon commander at that point?
I don't remember.
Okay. Well, let's see. Because there was Sergeant Berkey and there was Jim Campbell. Liebeck had just been hurt, so they were low on officers at that exact moment.
We were low on officers. Liebeck had been there the day before.
Right.
And I don't remember if he was there that day.
Because he was wounded at 902, and he came back a little later, but he missed the next couple of weeks. So did anybody make any effort to kind of orient you or tell you what to do?
Yeah, some of the guys, they were, telling us things to watch out for, and kind of getting us as comfortable as we could be, relaxed. They needed a machine gunner, and so Steve Mantha came around trying to solicit someone to volunteer for that. And I was thinking, don't volunteer. And anyway, he came around again and again and again. And then Bob Tarbuck came around. He actually carried the gun. And so I thought, well, he's smaller, if he can carry it, I can probably carry that gun. So we got to talking, and I wound up volunteering for it, and we went down on the side of the hill and fired it up. And
So what was the purpose of that? Why were you shooting it at that point?
Well, Steve Mantha took me down there, and he was holding the gun. I think he even fired it some.
Mm-hmm.
Then he handed it to me, and he was feeding the ammo. And anyway, I started firing, and instead of just pulling the trigger and just firing, I fired 2 and 3 round bursts, which is what we were trained to do. And he said, "You're the man."
Yeah. Okay. So he was checking you out, making sure you were going to do the job properly.
Right. Yeah, he didn't want me to melt the barrel by just firing down, pull the trigger and fire up everything you got on it.
Right. Okay. So now you're a machine gunner. All right. Now at about this point, the company gets a new commander because Jeff Wilcox comes in. Do you remember anything about him?
No, I don't remember being new, and there was so much going on.
Mm-hmm.
Just the commander, and how the chain of command was changing. I really didn't know about.
Mm-hmm. So you basically just go with your squad leader, and
Right.
that's pretty much it. Okay. So the guy's right there immediately around you. All right. Well, we're now going to get into early July of 1970, and this is a period when the campaign around Firebase Ripcord is heating up. This company has already been hit at 902, and normally you would take a company like that and have them refit for a while and come back, but you people were still out in the field. All right. So once you join the company, do you start patrolling now? And
We did. We went out on, and we were working the area around Ripcord.
right.
We might be out there a few days, and we came back up on Ripcord
Mhm.
and spent a night for some reason. I don't know, maybe they needed extra security or something, but our unit came up and spent the night on Ripcord. And then we would move back off and move around in that area.
Okay. Now about July 8th or 10th or somewhere in there, you were sent to Hill 1000. Now, were you with the company when they did that?
I had to be with them, but I really don't remember what we did or.
Okay. Because I guess the story is that you got to one side of the hill and D Company was there, and you had to walk around to the other side and go up. And then people got killed and you came back. That's not registering with you particularly, or?
No, because I was in the rear part of the line. I never did make it up there.
Okay. So you're just following the other guys,
Yeah.
and from where you were, even though it's a pretty small company at this point, there's still a lot that you don't know.
Right, yes.
Okay.
And I didn't get access information.
Okay. Now, did you find that you were able to handle marching around in the heat with the full pack? And
It was tough. My rucksack was too heavy. I didn't know how to pack it, and I learned fast how to lighten my backpack, my rucksack.
what were you carrying that you didn't need?
I had a ditty box to keep my stationery and letters in and things I didn't want wet.
Mm-hmm.
It was an M60 ammo can. I got rid of it and got a plastic bag for the face mask,
Mm-hmm.
which would seal up and protect anything that I needed protected,
Right.
dry, and much lighter.
All right. So you're just kind of learning how to survive in a place like
Right.
that.
I had a big jar of Tang.
Mm-hmm.
I did not need a bottle, a glass jar to carry around. And I didn't need the weight of that Tang. I got rid of that the first stop we made.
Okay. And so now there's sort of several weeks in there before Ripcord itself gets abandoned. Now, do you recall getting into any firefights along the way or encountering any NVA?
Yeah, we got fired up a couple of times, and that was when I grew to appreciate my drill sergeant. The first time we got fired up, I got in my foxhole and I had all of my gear and all of my partner's gear. I was sitting there thinking, looking at him, and I thought, you know, my drill sergeant trained me a lot better than yours trained you.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next time we got fired up, the same deal. I was there prepared out immediately when the first shot was fired. I was in the dirt and in the foxhole and had everything that I could stay there all day. I was prepared.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking around at the other guys and I thought, man, they didn't get trained as well as I did. And I thought I would hug that guy's neck.
Okay.
Because he was exactly right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And now also a lot of the guys in your company were pretty new, weren't they? I mean, you had some old hands.
Yes, we had a lot of newbies.
Mm-hmm.
So probably over half.
Okay. And how long did it take for you to kind of feel like you sort of knew what you were doing?
Well,
Or did you ever feel like that?
you never really know, but I mean, I felt like I was more confident on what I did, my actions, and how to operate, and things to watch for.
Okay.
And I developed it fast, very quickly.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, one thing that your company is involved in is that things get bad on and around the Ripcord fire base. They start having to get people out. And there was a company from the 1st Battalion of the 506 that was stuck out there outside of Ripcord. And your company was involved in getting them out on the 22nd.
They were pinned down for a time, I'm not sure, but several attempts had been made to get them out of there, and we went in then and were able to get them out. There was I think it was a 51 millimeter machine gun that was the big problem when we knocked it out and had relief.
Mm-hmm. And do you know who knocked it out, or?
I don't remember who did that, but that was good.
Okay. And then was getting people back out still a problem? Because were the helicopters still getting shot at?
No, that stopped the shooting the helicopters down. We had several helicopters shot down, and that took care of that problem.
All right. And did you see the guys from the company you were rescuing?
We did see a few of the guys as they came by us. We were holding security on one side, and as they were moving out and coming by us, we would maybe be able to talk to them a second or so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they had been there overnight in that spot at that point, and a lot of them had been hit.
They were ready they were trying to get their wounded out and get over to a landing zone so they could get out of there.
Mm-hmm. And do you remember how late it was that you got out? Because I think this was going on in the latter part of the day.
Right. I don't remember. I don't remember what time we got out, or even. It's been a long time ago.
Yeah. Okay. Just asking.
Yeah.
Because I know different things from different people. So what do you recall? Yeah. Okay. So you get them out of there, and now the next day, Ripcord itself gets evacuated, and now that's all done. All right. So with that all over with, what does your company do now that you're back?
Well, we just worked missions around that area. We were still, even though we didn't have the hill, we still wanted to have some control of the area around it, and we just we would move in, search an area, and clear it, so to speak, and then move on.
Okay. Now, at this point, now after Ripcord is all over, were you encountering the NVA much, or were they staying out of your way?
I think they would, it seemed like we would see where they had been, but they were moving back, staying out of our way. Occasionally we'd make contact, brief, and then they would take off.
Okay. And how long did you kind of do that sort of patrolling then after Ripcord?
The rest of the time that I was there, we really did that.
Okay.
We were in that same area for months. Shaw Valley and
All right.
so,
And was your unit taking losses along the way?
yes.
Okay. What kinds of things would happen, or what would cause the casualties?
Well, occasionally we would get in an area, an old landing zone that they had booby trapped, and someone would step on a booby trap and lose a foot. This happened several times, and we had some ambush. We would be blowing an LZ, and they would move in and set up an ambush, fire us up while we were working. And of course we're out in the open trying to make a clearing and for the birds to get in. We had some losses by friendly fire.
Okay. Now, would that be just small arms fire, or would it be artillery landing in the wrong place?
One particular time that I remember was October 27th of 70. We had gone on an old landing zone, and a guy stepped on a booby trap, and then 30 minutes later another guy stepped on a booby trap. We had gotten both of those evacuated, and we had pulled back down on the side of the hill, and we were going to NDP there, our nighttime defensive position. We observed 4 NVA coming through our NDP from the night before. And anyway, I sent a man down to tell that we were going to fire them up, and we had gotten in position there, set up some rifles to, and had a machine gun there. We had, we got the word back not to fire. They were going to call in mortars on them. And so anyway, the mortars came in, and 6 rounds, the 6th one was short, and it fell on us. And hit, seriously wounded one man, took the top of his skull off, and then small pieces of shrapnel hit about 3 or 4 more guys.
All right. And then in one of the incidents with booby traps and stuff, you lost your platoon leader that way.
Yes.
Can you talk about that event?
Yes, November actually it was 31st of October. One of my guys that was in my squad had gone on a riff with them to an old LZ, and he stepped on a booby trap and lost a foot, and then a few minutes later the lieutenant stepped on one. They were actually carrying the first guy out, and he stepped back to let them by, and stepped on a booby trap and lost his foot. And then we lost another lieutenant a little while later.
All right. Well, one of them was involved, it was a man in Ken Patetti.
Yes.
Was that the second one or the first one?
Lieutenant Kenneth Patetti. I'm not sure which one he was. If he was the first one or the second one there.
Okay. But I guess when you were talking about that off camera before, you were mentioning that he was where he was because the battalion commander had given him an order of some kind.
Right. Lieutenant Colonel Bard he was out in the field with us, and he wanted to go to the rear. He needed a bird to come pick him up. And we talked about going to this old landing zone, and I felt like it was a bad idea. We had been on another landing zone nearby, and it was booby trapped, and I felt sure that this one was too. I just had a bad feeling about it, and I bet he had orders, and so they went on over there, and it just didn't work out well.
Mm-hmm.
But the lieutenant colonel decided that he wouldn't fly out on that. He came back down the hill, and they never did go on up after the two booby traps went off.
All right. Now, did you otherwise see very much of the battalion commander, or did he just join you that one time?
That was, he was with us at one time, and of course, he didn't go out that day, so he was still with us, and we didn't have any other officers.
Mm-hmm.
The next day, we were blowing an LZ near our NDP right there, and next 50 yards out from us, a good place to blow an LZ, it appeared. And we set off our second charge, and then the NVA had moved in above us on a hillside and fired down on us. Wounded, one man had was hit in the head, bad wound there. He went down and never moved. He was out from the beginning. Another man was hit in the arm and the butt, and it ripped him up pretty good. And anyway, we got him off the hill, and got the other guy off the hill. Then went and got him. Sergeant Howell had small pieces of shrapnel in his shoulder back, and then I had some in my chest.
Mm-hmm.
And
You still didn't have an LZ at this point.
no, we didn't have an LZ. We had blown the trees down, but there was some brush there. We hadn't moved the brush back out of the way, so although a bird could come in, it couldn't set all the way down on the ground because there was a couple of limbs stacked up that needed to be moved. So we had wounded, and we called Battalion and got a medevac on the way and asked for a white team to come clear the area for us. And the bird came in, and when I heard it, I told him I could hear him, and he told me to pop smoke, and he identified the smoke and came on in to us and dropped out a Stokes litter. And we put the guy that was wounded the worst on the bottom, and then put the other guy on. And so when he came back in, he just sat down as low as he could get, and we flipped the Stokes litter up and threw it up in there, and got those guys headed toward the hospital.
Okay. So you were not, the North Vietnamese were not shooting at that point?
No, they had fired us up that, and it lasted, 40, 50 seconds, maybe a minute, and then it was over.
Okay.
So as soon as it started, I had grabbed the one guy and drug him down there, and then Sergeant Howell ran around, and we went up and grabbed the other guy.
Mm-hmm.
And just in a few seconds, it was over. And of course, we still didn't know, were they still sitting there, or are they ready to, are they reloading, gonna hit us again, or what? And but Sergeant Howell was trying to check the guys out, bandage, stop bleeding, whatever he could for first aid. And I went to get a medic and get some security and everything set up. And of course, medevac on the way.
Right. All right. Yeah. So, okay, that's a pretty busy moment.
Yeah.
All right. Now, was that about the most intense thing that you were caught up in, or the worst fight that you had, or the? I guess it wasn't a very long fight. It was just.
Yeah. It was intense, and it was. Yeah, that was probably me being right in the middle of it. That was probably about the worst one.
Yeah. All right. Now, would you ever find North Vietnamese bunkers or supply caches or
Yeah,
things
we
like
did.
that? What sorts of things would you run into?
Just a few days after this, we were moving, and we moved into a bunker complex, and we were, it was nighttime, dark, and anyway, we NDP'd there, just tried to sit up quietly, and the next morning when it started breaking light, we could see that we were in a bunker complex. So we had everyone to just pack up and move out quietly. And we managed to get out without them ever knowing we were there. And we backed off about 5 clicks and fired arty on it for a couple of days, and then we went back up and went through and cleared it. We found these bunkers were along each side of a holler.
A ravine or whatever?
Yeah, it was like a little valley in between these two hillsides. And they had bunkers dug. You'd find a hole in the ground. When you went inside, there's a big room there. And then there would be a tunnel connecting this bunker to the next. And they were chained together all the way up the hill. And then there was bamboo that came from the top up side of the hill and came through each bunker where they had fresh water running through this bamboo pipe. So they had water right there. They could just fill up their canteen or whatever. One bunker that we went in, we had a lot of AK-47s and the SKS rifles, and I got an NVA first aid bag and an NVA entrenching tool and canteen, and brought them home for souvenirs.
All right. Okay. Now, did you spend much time at all in the rear? Did you have stand downs or anything like that?
We were supposed to have I think a 3-day stand down once a month,
Mm-hmm.
and then every 3 months have a 7-day stand down. And we would come in for the 3-day stand down, and it might have been 2 months instead of 1, and we'd be in maybe 1 day or 2, and we'd have to go back out.
Mm-hmm.
And we never had an actual 7-day stand down. We'd come in for the 7-day stand down, and we'd make 3 or 4 days maybe and be back out.
Okay. Now, when you went to a stand down, was that to Camp Evans or somewhere else?
We went to Camp Evans, and then when we came in on the 7-day stand down, we went to, I think, China Beach.
China Beach was near there, yeah.
And so we got to spend some time on the beach, and that was kind of nice to relax.
All right. Now, you mentioned, like, while we're on this kind of topic, did you get an R&R? Did you go anywhere?
I did get an R&R. It was, let's see, March of '71. I went to Bangkok, Thailand.
Mm-hmm. And what was it like to be in a place where there was not a war going on?
It was nice. It was relaxing. It was really relaxing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, let's see, kind of. Okay, there's a couple of. Okay, the next thing I want to ask about, yeah. Let's see. You mentioned you got hit yourself. You were wounded at the time when you were trying to get those guys out.
Right.
And then were you wounded any other time?
Yes, but now, see that day, Sergeant Howell had pieces of shrapnel in his back,
Mm-hmm.
and I had pieces in my chest, but they were all small pieces
Mm-hmm.
of shrapnel, like a .22 bullet or
Mm-hmm.
a kitchen match head.
Mm-hmm.
The medic picked those out of us and gave us some penicillin, and we went on.
Mm-hmm.
In August, before that happened, the 1st of November, we had gotten ambushed blowing an LZ, and Paul Barty had some shrapnel in the side of his head, and I had shrapnel in my shoulder.
Did you go to the rear for that, or
No,
just
we
stay in the
didn't.
field?
The medic came over and picked it out with tweezers and gave us some penicillin,
Mm-hmm.
and we carried on.
All right. Did you have any problems with other kinds of tropical diseases or things?
You know, during the monsoon season, we had ringworm. Everyone seemed to have ringworm, and it's hard to keep your feet and everything dry, and it's so humid the bacteria just grew so easily.
All right. Now, there's a number of stereotypes about Vietnam that I ask about just to see what you did or didn't see. One of them has to do with drug use. You'll have people who assume everybody in Vietnam was on drugs or things like that. But
No.
did you observe anything like that or much like that?
Now, there were a few guys that did do drugs. No one did drugs in our unit in the field.
Mm-hmm.
Except one time, and this guy came out, a new guy, and there were these two guys together. They were in my position, and my buddy and I were going to pull the last two guards, and they were going to pull the first two. Well, they didn't wake my buddy up, and so anyway, the next morning I went over and asked him what happened. The guy said, well, I couldn't sleep last night, and so I didn't think there was any point in waking you up. And I thought, well, I've done that same thing, so I'm good with that. The next morning, it was the same deal, and I went over and pulled his hooch open, and he had a joint laying there where he'd been smoking dope. And I said, no, this ain't gonna work, guy. I said, you can go turn yourself into LT, or I'll take you down there. And he said, I'm not going out. And I said, yes, you're not gonna smoke dope out here. It's not gonna happen.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's the only time we had it in the field. And when they, in the rear, there were guys that stayed there all the time that did do drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And I observed one guy. I walked in the hooch, and this guy was had a band on his arm, was shooting up.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, man, how could he do that? But
So it was around, but by and large, it was not something that you do
No.
in the field.
no.
Okay. And then the other issue that comes up a lot, especially toward the end of the war, is racial tensions. And did the black troops segregate themselves from the white ones, or in the field did it not matter?
Well, they seemed to feel like it wasn't their war, it was someone else's war. And
Mhm.
I thought, well, I mean, I didn't really want to claim it, but I'm here, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do the best I can to take care of myself and everyone around me.
Right.
So,
But if you're on a base camp, did you notice that the black guy's going one way and the white guy's going another way?
well, it wasn't that. Now, there were some black guys that they were out in the field with us every
Mhm.
day.
Mhm.
And so they didn't segregate when we came to the rear.
Okay.
They were still our friends when
Right.
we got back. There were some guys, and it seemed like the ones that were the worst had jobs in the rear,
Right.
and they never were out in the field anyway, or else they found some reason to not be in the field, and they got injured or
Mhm.
whatever, sick, and they were in the rear. And they continued to have problems and stayed in the rear.
Mhm.
Now they grouped up, and when we'd go to chow line, we might be almost to the door, and 15 guys would walk up and run out at the door, and everyone get in line in front of you. We didn't really think that was quite the way to do things, and we weren't really happy about it, but it wasn't a hatred thing.
Yeah. But you let them do it rather than get into a fight?
We'd get on to them about, hey guy, line starts back here in the rear, it forms to the rear. But it's,
Okay. All right. Now, if you think back over that time that you spent in Vietnam, are there other things that kind of stand out in your memory that you haven't kind of mentioned here yet?
I really can't think of anything
Okay.
right now.
Okay, yeah, you will later, but that's okay.
Yeah.
All right, so now did you spend a full 12 months in Vietnam, or did you get out a little early?
I got out almost 30 days early or something like that. It was 11 months and a couple of days that I was there.
And how did that happen?
Well, they were cutting back, and so they were just, they started giving us early outs. And, you know, so supposedly 30 days is what they call it, but, you know, you might get 20 days
Yeah.
or whatever. I almost got the full 30.
Okay, now how did they get you back to the States from Vietnam?
We, once we got our paperwork, we moved to, I think we traveled to Da Nang maybe by truck, and then flew from there to another base, and then flew out from there. When I came home, we landed in Japan for a few hours, and then from there on to Washington.
Okay, and now at that point, did you still have time left on your enlistment?
I had about 8 months left, 8 or 9. I had only been in a short time when I went to Vietnam, and then 11 months there, and I'm back in the States, and so I went from May until September, and I got a 4-month early out of the Army.
Okay, so what did you do for those last couple of months?
I was a re-enlistment NCO in my unit because I was the only NCO there that had been to my duty station and was just waiting to get out. The rest of the guys were waiting an assignment to go to Alaska, go to Germany, or go to Vietnam, or they were still sending some guys to Vietnam on some jobs.
Okay, well, and where were you based?
I was at Fort Carson, Colorado.
Okay, and let's see, was it the 5th Mechanized Division there, or who was there
It was
then?
the 4th.
4th Infantry Division? Okay. All right, so that's a unit that had been in Vietnam. All right, so you were just assigned to them temporarily. So what was it like living in Colorado after Vietnam?
It was pretty nice. It was higher elevation. The air was definitely thinner there.
Okay. Now, did they make any effort to get you to re-enlist?
Well, I was the re-enlistment NCO.
Oh.
So, I knew I wasn't going to re-enlist. So.
Okay. So when you do get out then, do you just go back home again and pick up where you left off?
Yes, I was working at the munitions plant. We were making TNT, and so I took a little break when I got out and took off for a couple of weeks or so, and then I reported to work and got a physical and went back to work. And they were having a cutback, and so I put in an application at another job, and went to work there, and got laid off at the ammunitions plant. So, then from there, it was hard to adjust, and so I went through a lot of jobs, moving around.
Okay. Now, how did people in that part of the country, because you're sort of where Alabama and Georgia, Tennessee kind of all come together up there, in that area, how did they treat returning veterans?
They're not too bad. Some of my friends didn't care to talk to me anymore for some reason. And when I came back in country, in Washington there, we were near Seattle, I think, and we, when we started to come off the plane, they were yelling at us. They had a group of people there, and apparently it was an organized group to protest the war, and they were spitting at us and calling us names and calling us baby killer. And
Now, were they kept away from you at all, or?
yeah, the MPs were there, and they were keeping them back. But And I wore my uniform as I traveled, and I came back through O'Hare and Atlanta and to Chattanooga, and I didn't have any problem. No one said anything in the other places.
Okay. All right. Now, what made it difficult to adjust to civilian life again, or what kind of trouble did you have with that?
Well, whenever you do your job, you need to do it right.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, you can get killed, or you can get your buddy killed.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything was a life and death situation for me. And the people around me, I was very serious about what we were doing to make sure that it was done properly and no loose ends. And everybody else didn't see my point of view on it.
Mm-hmm.
So we had some clashes.
Mm-hmm.
So
Now, did you eventually kind of find a career track that you liked, or a job that you could stay with for a while?
I did. I eventually, it was about 10 years, I got into an apprenticeship program, working construction work, and it seemed like my callous exterior was accepted better with construction workers.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, I got into the apprenticeship program in steam fitter, and so I worked, I had blueprints to work from, and find my material and my benchmarks and go locate where it's supposed to be and then build it, and so that was good.
And getting it right matters at that point.
It did matter. And see, I could work with on my tolerances, it'd be 0 minus and plus 1/8 of an inch, and I like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that worked great for me.
All right. Now, when you look back at the time that you spent in the service, do you think you learned anything from it or took anything positive out of it?
Yeah. With a lot of people out on the job, they don't care if they get along with their coworker or not. And even though I had clashes with coworkers, it wasn't anything personal. It was just about getting the job done. And that was the thing about our squad or our company or whatever in Vietnam. We had to have each other to do our job. Everybody had to do their job.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't do it because you're not willing to, I'm going to jack you up. And if you can't do it, I'm going to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's important we all work together. And whether I like you or don't like you, it doesn't matter. The job has to be done.
Right. All right. Well, the whole thing makes for a pretty good story, so I'd just like to thank you for taking the time to share it today.
Yes, sir.
All
Thank
right.
you.